Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into the life and work of John Brenkus,
Right.
the creative force behind, well, that hugely popular TV show, Sports Science.
Yeah, absolutely. If you watch sports, like at all in the last couple of decades, you definitely saw his work.
You really did.
And the news that brings us here, as noted in the sources you shared, is his recent passing, May 31st, 2025.
Yeah.
At age 53, though some reports are saying 54.
Right, there's a little discrepancy there.
And his company, Brinks.td, they announced that he'd been battling depression. And the way they put it was he lost his fight with this terrible illness.
It's just incredibly sad news, and it really adds a profound layer to his story, doesn't it?
It really does.
So our mission today for this deep dive is to explore who John Brenkus was, looking at his impact on sports media, which was huge, his entrepreneurial ventures too, and very importantly, the really candid way he spoke about his own struggles with mental health.
Exactly. We're going to use the stack of articles, interviews, discussions you provided as our map, essentially.
Perfect. It's quite a legacy to explore.
Definitely multifaceted. So maybe let's start by laying some groundwork.
Good idea.
The sources mention he grew up in Vienna, Virginia, and he was apparently quite the athlete himself in high school, played multiple sports
Oh, interesting.
before graduating from the University of Virginia.
Right, so sports were definitely kind of in his DNA early on.
Seemed like it.
But his first steps professionally, they weren't straight into sports analysis, were they?
No, not directly. He actually started out producing short films, music videos even.
Right.
Worked with a DC band called Emmett Swimming, apparently became an early investor.
Okay.
And that production background, that kind of led him to co-found Base Productions. That was with Michael Stern.
Base Productions, right.
And that company really made a name for itself. They focused on reality, documentary, and what they called unscripted infotainment.
Infotainment, yeah. And one of their big things, their trademark almost, was that innovative use of tech, right? Motion capture, CGI.
Exactly. That tech became their signature. Think about it. Motion capture uses sensors. CGI uses computer graphics.
To visualize things you just can't see normally, like the exact forces in a tackle or, the spin on a ball.
Precisely. Making the invisible visible. They did this for a whole range of channels, too. A&E, Nat Geo, ESPN, Spike TV. The list goes on in your sources.
Yeah, a lot of big names. And they had offices in L.A. and D.C.
Correct.
Okay.
Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., which, leads us pretty directly into the phenomenon most people really know him for, sports science.
Okay, sports science, yeah.
And interestingly, the sources trace its origins back a bit further to a 2006 series they did for National Geographic called Fight Science, Calculating the Ultimate Warrior.
Fight Science, I remember that.
Yeah, so that show applied all this science and tech to martial arts, to fighting styles. It kind of laid the technical foundation.
Right, so sports science basically took that core concept, that tech, and just blew it up across the entire world of athletics.
Exactly. The premise was honestly brilliant. Simple but brilliant. Explore the science, the engineering behind these incredible athletic feats.
Use data, use those amazing visuals to bust myths, settle barstool arguments sometimes.
Right. And even analyze controversial moments, like you mentioned Deflategate earlier.
Yeah.
That article talked about the physics involved there.
Yeah, they'd break that stuff down.
And they filmed a lot of it inside what became known as the Sports Science Lab. Basically a huge airport hangar in L.A.
It's very high tech.
Or they take a mobile lab out on the road. And Dr. Cynthia Burr, she was key, professor of biomedical engineering, the lead engineer, crucial in translating all that complex biomechanics stuff.
Into something we could all understand, yeah. Those visuals were amazing.
And the show itself, it kind of evolved, didn't it?
It did. Started as, an hour-long show on FSN, Fox Sports Network?
Right, FSN. Ran there from 2007 to 2017. But then ESPN bought it in 2010.
Ah, okay. And that's when it changed format.
Yeah, it shifted more to those shorter segments, those vignettes, the ones you'd see popping up during SportsCenter and other ESPN shows, became really popular in that format.
Those were everywhere. Hard to miss.
Definitely. And they brought in, world-class athletes,
Yeah.
professionals testing their absolute limits in these controlled settings.
But John himself, he wasn't afraid to jump in sometimes, right? When they needed, an average Joe baseline.
Exactly. Yeah, he'd step in for those comparisons,
Yeah.
gave it that relatable perspective for us watching at home.
Which was great. And the impact, it was pretty significant. It wasn't just cool TV.
No, it was seen as genuinely educational. They even had a deal with cable in the classroom.
Wow.
And the industry definitely noticed. 6 Sports Emmy Awards.
6. That's impressive.
Yeah, multiple wins for outstanding graphic design, which, speaks to how well they used that tech.
Absolutely.
And also outstanding new approaches in sports programming, recognizing how different it was.
It really changed things.
And John's perspective on it, he saw the whole creative process as really collaborative, involving the network, his staff, the athletes, even the audience. Like everyone was discovering these things together.
That's a great way to look at it. Okay, so sports science, clearly his most visible success, but his drive, that curiosity about limits, it went beyond just the show.
Oh, for sure. He branched out. In 2010, he authored The Perfection Point.
Right, the book.
Right.
Became a New York Times bestseller, the sources said.
Yep, and that book, it essentially took the sports science idea into print form. He set out to pinpoint the absolute physiological limits.
Like the theoretical maximum the human body could ever achieve.
Exactly. Based purely on physics, applied math.
Mm.
For 9 different athletic events, he calculated things like, what's the fastest possible mile? Or the heaviest bench press imaginable.
Crazy stuff to think about.
But reading his own words from that 2013 interview you shared, it wasn't purely about the numbers for him.
What did he say?
He said something like, while limits have to exist theoretically, the book was really about what are we as a species going to do as we try to achieve perfection.
Ah, okay. So focusing more on the human drive, the pursuit itself.
Yeah, the relentless striving, not just the cold, hard science.
Interesting perspective.
And that entrepreneurial spirit, that energy, it clearly didn't stop there. In 2013, he founded Brinks.tv, became the CEO.
Brinks.tv. Okay, what was the idea behind that?
Well, it was conceived as a modern media production company, a platform, initially focused on sports, but it kind of expanded into general media coverage, even sports betting content.
Right, moving with the times there.
Definitely. And Brinks.tv developed his own shows, too. One that caught my eye in the sources was the GOAT Code.
The GOAT Code. Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, they teased it as basically sports science on steroids.
Yeah.
The idea was using science and interviews to, crack the code of what makes the greatest of all time in various sports.
Oh, cool. Who did he talk to for that?
Some real legends.
Yeah.
Based on the descriptions. Dwight Freeney, Mike Singletary, Marcus Allen. Pretty big names.
Wow, yeah. Hall of Famers.
And Brinks.tv also forged some, interesting partnerships. Showed kind of the breadth of his vision.
Like what?
They were the title sponsor for the World Downhill Skateboarding Championship. Called it the Brinks Cup.
Downhill skateboarding. Okay.
Yeah, and they partnered with Icon Source on something called the NIL House that's focused on name, image, likeness deals for college athletes.
Oh, very current.
And got a multi-year broadcast deal with the American Cornhole League.
Cornhole. Seriously, he was covering everything.
Seems like it. And he was hands-on, too, hosting and producing live events, like a WBC World Boxing Council Super Featherweight title fight in 2024.
Busy guy. He also jumped into podcasting, right?
He did. 2017, launched the Brink of Midnight podcast.
The Brink of Midnight. Okay.
The idea there was discussing these significant kind of pivotal moments, brink of midnight moments, he called them, with athletes, celebrities.
Who were some of the guests?
Sources mentioned people like Ray Lewis, Sharon Stone, Larry Fitzgerald. Big names again. Released 100 episodes, apparently.
Wow, 100 episodes.
And connecting to that name, the Brink of Midnight, was also the name of a band he formed.
A band. Seriously?
Yeah, with his then-wife, Lizzie. They even had, a viral Christmas song and music video. Featured a bunch of famous athletes, raised money for a charity called Unite 4. Good.
Huh. So his creativity really wasn't just limited to sports and science. Music, too.
Seems that way. He had a lot of different dimensions.
Okay, now, we need to shift gears here significantly. As you noted right at the start, talking about the circumstances of his passing.
Right.
A really critical part of John Brenkus' story, especially in recent years, was his remarkable openness about struggling with mental health.
Yes, it's a difficult area, but vital to discuss based on the sources you provided.
Absolute vital.
There was an interview he did. It was with Marcellus Wiley in 2023. It was included in your source material, and it was just incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
He spoke so candidly about hitting a really, really low point. This was apparently after selling sports science to ESPN. He was living in Park City, Utah, felt very isolated, and described just an emotional crash. Said it set him spiraling into a very deep depression. And he reached a point where, in his own words, he was flat out suicidal.
Oh, wow. That's incredibly hard to hear, just unimaginable.
And it really is. And he shared this deeply personal story, an anecdote about his dog, Zeppelin.
His dog. tragic.
Yeah. He said Zeppelin somehow sensed his distress, actually intervened, started tugging on his pants. And he said that small action, that tug, was just enough to kind of snap him out of that immediate suicidal funk, as he put it.
Right.
And it prompted him to pick up the phone and call his mom for help.
Wow. Wow. A dog's intuition. That's powerful.
Incredibly powerful. And that moment, that became a real turning point. It led him to seek professional help.
Okay.
And he was open about the challenges there, too. Said it wasn't easy finding the right support. Went to, I think, 6 different psychologists and psychiatrists.
6. That takes persistence.
Before he finally found what he called the right path with a doctor back in Virginia.
And how did he view that whole experience going through that darkness?
He actually framed that entire journey, the struggle, finding recovery, as his greatest blessing and greatest victory. His words. He described it as getting through a valley of darkness.
His greatest blessing and victory. That's quite a perspective.
It really is. And he also spoke very directly about the stigma he felt around mental health.
Yeah, that's still such a huge issue.
He felt that, admitting you have mental health issues makes people look at you differently, creates embarrassment, makes you reluctant to share.
Yeah.
He described depression sometimes as not even rational, just like a thought loop you can't get out of your head. Emphasize how isolating that feeling is.
That description, a thought loop you can't get out of your head, that really resonates. I think a lot of people can understand that feeling.
Absolutely. But his message, stemming from that interview, and it's just so important we amplify this, it was one of hope.
What did he say?
He said quite directly, listen, there is hope. There are hotlines, there are friends, there is family, there are other people. Talk about it.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
Simple but powerful advice.
Extremely. And, the news of his death, and particularly the specific language used in the announcement about him battling depression, losing his fight,
Yeah.
that has understandably triggered a lot of discussion. You saw it in places like that Reddit thread you shared.
People talking about the phrasing, lost his fight.
Exactly. And grappling with the whole often difficult conversation around men's mental health, around suicide. His passing has really brought that to the forefront again.
It really highlights how essential these open conversations are, even when we're struggling with the right words, the right language to use for these internal battles, and sadly, their tragic outcomes.
It absolutely does. So as we remember John Brenkus, the official announcement came from Brinks.tv on June 1st, 2025. Confirmed he died the day before, May 31st.
At age 53 or 54.
Following that battle with depression. And the announcement included the family's request for privacy, but also this heartfelt encouragement for anyone else struggling to please seek help.
Which echoes his own message.
Precisely. And tributes have been pouring in, really reflecting the kind of impact he had. One example you had in the sources was from ESPN's Randy Scott on SportsCenter.
What did he say?
He called Brenkus uniquely talented and singularly brilliant. Not just at analyzing sports, but then translating sports and science to fans in these really memorable ways. Because, as Scott said, John was memorable.
That's a great description. John was memorable.
He also added that the world was, quote, a better place with John Brenkus in it.
That's a lovely tribute.
And you see that same sentiment, that impact, reflected so deeply in the fan comments, too. Especially in that Reddit thread.
Yeah. What were people saying?
So many people fondly remembering sports science being a huge part of their childhoods. A show that really bridged their love for science and sports, which isn't always easy to do.
No, it's not. He made science cool in a sports context.
Exactly. And his openness about his depression, that clearly resonated deeply with many people facing similar struggles. It prompted really important discussions online.
That's good to hear, at least. That something positive could come from sharing his story.
And some fans even explicitly credited his work, sports science, with influencing their education, their career paths, mentioning fields like statistics because of the show.
Wow. That's a real legacy right there, influencing career choices.
Definitely. So summing up this deep dive into the sources you shared, John Brenkus leaves behind this really rich, multifaceted legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. A pioneer, making the complex science of sports accessible, fascinating to millions.
A successful producer and an entrepreneur constantly looking for new avenues in media.
And ultimately someone who found incredible courage to speak so openly about his own personal battle with depression.
And that public vulnerability about his struggles, it serves as such a powerful reinforcement of that crucial message of hope he shared himself.
That message about the absolute importance of seeking help, of talking openly, even when, maybe especially when, it feels hardest.
Exactly.
John Brenkus dedicated so much of his professional life to exploring the absolute physical limits of human performance. In sports science, in the perfection point.
Right, the outer edges of what the body can do.
Yeah. But his own life journey, including that courageous battle with depression he shared, it really reminds us that the challenges we face, they're not just external, are they? Not just measurable ones in a lab.
No.
The profound internal ones within our own minds, they require their own distinct kind of strength, resilience, and maybe most importantly, that courage to seek support.
Well said.
So thinking about his story, what can you, listening right now, take away about human resilience? About the critical importance of reaching out, not just when we're pushing athletic boundaries, but maybe more importantly, when we're navigating the incredibly complex landscape of our own mental well-being.